Many people talk about the potential for intelligent automation and AI to radically transform the way we work. But why is this the case? And what does it really mean to be a smart enterprise? Well, here to tell us all about harnessing the power of technology for your organization is Terry Walby, founder and chief executive of Thoughtonomy. With a career spanning the likes of IGM, GE Capital and Computer Center, Terry is now heading up Thoughtonomy, an award-winning automation technology company that provides an infinitely scalable virtual workforce. He joins us today to explain the business case for intelligent automation and AI in enterprise, how it's changing the way we work, and what the workforce of the future might actually look like. Please join me in welcoming to the auditorium, Terry Walby.
Hi, my name is Terry Walby. I'm founder and chief executive of Thoughtonomy, and I'd like to talk to you today about automation beyond RPA. There's a huge amount of hype about robotic process automation and the value it delivers to businesses across countries, geographies, and industries. With very good reason, because what robotic process automation has done has allowed organizations to frictionlessly automate their existing applications by using an interaction at the user interface level. Suddenly applications that are impossible to automate using traditional means can be driven by a robot in order to deliver a business outcome. So a fantastic opportunity for businesses to deliver value where previously that would have been difficult, uneconomic, or unviable. But interestingly, as the use of RPA has grown, so some cracks have appeared in the capability of that product alone. Often RPA initiatives are approached tactically because by its nature it's non-disruptive. It's easy for a business user to deploy RPA to deliver business value. That can deliver some great short-term benefits, but also store up some problems for the future. As organizations are reaching RPA at scale, they're realizing the limitations of the technology on its own, and also the difficulty in managing lots of disparate activities initiated by different business lines to deliver short-term tactical benefit within their organizations. And as businesses are adopting technology, servers, software in order to run their RPA initiatives, they're almost becoming mini IT departments, which can also create other challenges. In addition, RPA addresses a proportion of the workforce that is focused on rules-based, highly structured, highly repetitive activity. For very big businesses, that can be huge amounts of their workforce. But for many organizations, the volume and scale of their human workforces don't necessitate the need for an RPA solution, but still have a very valid use case for automation. It's for this reason that Thoughtonomy are thinking beyond the capabilities of RPA to deliver value and much more broadly into the future of workforce automation. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that today. In terms of the RPA marketplace and the landscape, as I mentioned, RPA has a certainly addressable market, and according to Forrester, by 2021, financially that market will be worth 2.9 billion. So there's a huge market there, a huge opportunity for RPA vendors and for organizations looking at adopting RPA, a significant proportion of their workforce that perhaps could be addressed using robotics. But if we think beyond that, if we think into the workforce, if we think into the workforce that isn't necessarily doing high volume, low complexity, repetitive tasks, but still delivering outcomes based in business systems and applications that are inherently inefficient. If we think beyond RPA into the digital labor marketplace, you can see it's about 20 times the size. And underpinning our view of the opportunity for digital labor and the problem that it's able to address is the concept of workforce productivity. On the right-hand side of this chart, you'll see an illustration of workforce productivity from the UK-based Office of National Statistics in the back end of 2017. And you can see something very interesting. You can see that between 1994 and the financial crisis in 2007, workforce productivity increased by about 35%. So the workforce across different tasks, activities and industries became 35% more productive in that 12 or so year period. From 2007 until the current day, that workforce productivity is largely static. And we see three main reasons for that being the case. Firstly, the inefficiency of human knowledge workers. So people are just inherently inefficient. If an individual works in a business for an 8-hour day, they're never productive for those 8 hours. They're driven by interrupts, they're driven by challenges, they need comfort breaks, they need refreshment, they perhaps need to interact with colleagues, both socially and for the purposes of their working day, all of which detracts from their ability to be productive. Oftentimes organisations look at lower cost sources of labour in order to cope with that inefficiency, but inherently that's not improving the efficiency, that's simply looking for a lower cost base. Secondly, organisations are limited by the applications and systems that they use in order to execute work. Quite often disparate, disconnected applications underpin a business. And particularly in today's ecosystem where services and functionality is provided from outside of a business by partners, by suppliers, by competitors even, the application landscape is complex and puts a limit on the ability for technology to deliver value. Ultimately, people end up being the glue between disparate and disconnected applications. And the third challenge we see in workforce productivity is the organisational structures and skills-based teams that underpin any business. And let me illustrate that a little further. If you look at any organisation of any size and scale, then it will largely look something like this. It'll consist of a number of business functions with organisational hierarchy, with heads, managers, leaders, and supervisors. And within those organisational structures will be teams or departments, skills-based teams that have a certain functional output. And they will follow defined business processes, perhaps documented processes, perhaps undocumented processes, in order to execute and deliver an outcome using a number of business systems. And those systems may be functionally aligned to a department, or they may span multiple departments and technologies. But as we've already highlighted, for almost all organisations, and certainly any we've worked with, there are a number of disparate, disconnected business systems supporting any given outcome. I guess we've already talked about the inherent inefficiency of those teams or departments. So we know that within those teams, within those functions, within those departments, there is an inefficiency of human labour executing tasks that is largely accepted. But there's another inefficiency caused by the structure of those teams or departments. So we group human resources into skills-based teams or departments because it makes perfect sense to do so. If you have an HR function, you want to be working in an HR function alongside similarly qualified HR professionals, learning from each other, sharing your skills and able to cover periods of absence or unavailability. Similarly, if you work in an IT function, you'll work with suitably and similarly skilled IT folk. If you work in finance, you'll work with finance folk, and so on across a business, with very good reason. But of course, the nature of work is not linear. So within any given period, the load placed on the HR department is not the same. It fluctuates over time. The challenge with skills-based resources is that when the load on the HR team, as an example, increases, you can't suddenly borrow people from finance or IT to become HR specialists. They don't have the skills, they don't have the technology, they don't have access to the right tools in order to be able to do that. So it's impossible for them to be able to function. So consequently, the HR team needs to resource itself to cope with the peaks in demand and accept that when there are troughs in demand, that inefficiency exists, and that overcapacity represents an inefficiency. Now that's interesting and a necessary evil, I would suggest, of skills-based resource pools. As we've seen people approach technology to deployed into automation of work, what's interesting is that the vast majority of organisations have approached it like this. So they've looked at the opportunities for automation in the same skills and resource-based silos as they would have used for people. So effectively, that's replicating the inefficiency of those skills-based pools with technology. And whether those automation tools are niche, function-specific applications for a specific outcome, or whether increasingly they are based on robots, based on software robots, the use of robotics in a tactical way to deliver value within a business, they are disconnected from each other and effectively limited in their functionality by the pool and resource group they sit in. Our view is that that is replicating a human inefficiency with technology and is not an appropriate way to think about workforce automation. Where in fact, if we consider technology and disaggregate the technology from the function it's performing, actually a skills-based resource, a pool of digital labour, can be used to deliver a proxy for skills-based resource across the entirety of an organisation. and should be able to flex up and down in terms of size and scale, but also be able to deliver value to any function as and when it's required, effectively netting out the variances and cyclical nature of work that underpins any business. And that's a different approach to workplace automation that is at the heart of the way that Thoughtonomy delivers the virtual workforce. It's based on three core technology principles that allow that vision of digital labour to be delivered in a way that is infinitely scalable, that is highly secure, and is able to deliver capability into any function of a business. And those technologies are, first of all, cloud computing. So by hosting digital labour in the cloud, we're able to use cloud principles of elasticity. So both from a point of view of the infrastructure on which the technology resides, but also the ability to understand load and to elastically increase resources as load dictates, and then to remove those resources when no longer required. And that's the fundamental underpinnings of an architecture that ensures global delivery, infinite flexibility, and high degrees of security. Secondly, the principles of robotics. So I mentioned some of the limitations of robotics at the start of this session. But RPA is a fantastic technology. It liberates the capability to address interaction with business applications of all types. Because it's able to interact with the user interface of an application, it's fundamentally able to address integration into any business application, because all business applications have a user interface, whether that's a web application navigated through a URL, whether it's a locally launched application, whether it's something that presents a command line where people type coded commands, or whether it's a legacy system using some kind of mainframe terminal emulator. All of those applications have a user interface. Therefore, the ability of a robot, of RPA, to interact at the user interface level liberates any application on the planet for automation. It's a fantastic underpinning capability that is at the source, at the heart of this concept of frictionless automation. And combined with the delivery mechanisms and the scalability of the cloud, ensures that an unlimited pool of resource can be made available to do work, providing that work is available to them, providing the knowledge and capability, and providing the information that underpins the execution of work is available to them to do so. And that's where the third technology principle comes in, and that is the concept of cognitive AI. So cognitive AI delivers two functionalities into digital labour, into a virtual workforce. Firstly, it allows the platform, a virtual workforce platform, to orchestrate the requirements of work with the resources that are available to it. So breaking the fixed and defined nature of work and workers, or robots to activity, machine learning can be deployed in order to understand the requirements of a business, and the service levels required to support that business, and the resources required in order to deliver an outcome, and make virtual workers available as and when required, and give them the necessary knowledge in order to execute a process. By disaggregating the knowledge of process execution from the resource that does the work, suddenly the orchestration is able to treat the platform, the underpinning capability, the resource available to it, as a genuine pool of resource that can deliver against any defined task on demand. It's able to understand business priorities, it's able to understand the importance of certain tasks relative to each other, and it's able to orchestrate its workforce in order to ensure those business outcomes are met. And combined with the underpinning architecture of cloud, it's able to scale the resources available to it up and down as required in order to ensure the defined outcome is realized. Of course, what it's also able to do is to provide data. So for every task execution, for every process, for every activity, the system is able to understand how long things take, how effective they are, how successful they are, and it's able to utilize that information in its own machine learning engine in order to deliver a defined outcome. Effectively, it's self-managing, self-orchestrating, autonomous technology. The second use of intelligence, of cognitive AI within the platform, is the ability to manage data sources that aren't structured. The limitation of robotics is that it requires a structured workflow, structured process, and structured information in order to be able to execute that process. The reality, of course, and as you saw with Forrester's projection at the start of this session, the reality, of course, is that is only a fraction of the work of a human workforce, many of which is dictated by unstructured sources of data, semi-structured information, ambiguity, or perhaps even natural language. So the other use of artificial intelligence is in order to provide structure, translation to information in order to be able to execute a process. So once the definition of a process execution has been done, then intelligence can be used to trigger that process based on unstructured or semi-structured sources of information. So whether that's a document, such as an invoice or a credit note or a remittance that is used to define a workflow and deliver an outcome, whether it's completely unstructured language in an email context, or whether it's natural language in a conversation via a chat interface, all of those sources of interaction can be used to define a workflow. And by defining a workflow, can be used for process execution. So as this process execution is happening, the platform is learning, it's able to orchestrate work, it's able to understand and interpret success, and it's able to use that in order to improve over time. So as you can see, RPA is a fantastic technology, able to deliver real value, but with some limitations as it approaches scale and as it approaches ongoing manageability. The use of AI technology liberates RPA to do many things that wouldn't be possible with RPA alone. And the use of cloud enables a digital labour force to be built, which is available globally 24/7 and able to execute any task that's been defined and it's been taught to do. Thanks for listening. That's been an introduction to digital labour beyond RPA. I'm Terry Walby. Thanks for your time.
That was Terry Walby, founder and chief executive of Thoughtonomy. If you've got any questions for Terry, be sure to join us now in the networking rooms where you can ask him your questions on live chat. We'll also be having discussions with other speakers during the day, so be sure to check in after your sessions, and also to take part in our live poll, which you can access in the menu bar at the top of your screen. Otherwise, please join us back here at 11:45 a.m. GMT, where we'll be joined by PwC's Program Lead for Artificial Intelligence, Rob McCargo.